Hello, my name is Dr. Maya Byfield. My business is The Phenomenal STEMist. I'm so excited to be here in Orange County because it's where I live. I live in Apopka, Florida. And I decided to make this business because I saw a need for underrepresented students to be successful in STEM, which stands for science, technology, engineering, math. And the best way I can do that is just provide products for parents to prepare them, whether it's a book or online STEM camps or just video podcasting. My goal is to transform this community, especially those who are underrepresented. And the way to do that is to help parents understand their children's minds and basically develop them at different stages of their lives to be prepared for a successful STEM career. Thank you so much. That's why I'm here. Hey, 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 it's the Phenomenal STEMist. Good evening, everyone. I am so excited about this panel right here. It's not the typical group that you see, except for my friend Bryant. Bryant is in the house. Thanks for making it out. Um, uh, Kamoy is on vacation. Howard has something to do with the kids. And so I felt that this would have been a great conversation based on the information that's been going on all in the news right now with, I'm not even going to mention her name, but the doctor so and so who can't seem to show her doctorate. Is, I'm very passionate about education and getting the proper licensure. And so my guests today are Dr. Shauna K. Denham Wilkes and Dr. Adrienne Brown. Perfect examples of people who went to school, got their PhDs, and then got their licensure. And so, and it's Kamoy is a physician, and most people they say, okay, I have to have a licensed physician. It's common sense. Somehow, when it comes to others, hey, Rochelle is in the house.
Hey.
um, Somehow, when it comes to others, there seems to be, oh, I don't need a licensed person for mental health. What? Are you kidding me? I don't have for life coaching, or I don't have to be a licensed engineer. I don't need to go to school. I'm glad you guys are here. Rochelle Harris, also a licensed registered nurse. It is the conversation about the importance of credentials. So thank you once again. Thank you, Shauna. Thank you, Adrian. Thank you, Rochelle. Thank you, Brian, for joining us. Feel free to greet everybody.
Hi, everyone. Good to see you and good to be part of this discussion.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. All right. I'll jump right in and ask the first question. So looking back, what credential, whether it is it the degree, the certification, the license, or the specialized training, most significantly changed the trajectory of your career and why? So which one? And anybody can go first. I'll usually go so that you get to give you some time to think. For me, the most in wait, am I reading the right question? Sorry, wrong question. Sorry, here's the question. That was last week. Why is it important for the public to understand the difference between a degree, a certification, or a professional license? That's the first question. Why is it important to know the difference? And I want to ask those who have the licenses to talk today. Brian, you're coming in for comment relief with me because me and you, we don't have licensure. Why is it important?
Nobody needed to know that I didn't have a license.
I said me and you.
I was going to be quiet today. They put me out there. Okay. All right.
Why is it important for the public to understand the difference between a degree, certification, and a license? So we'll go with Dr. Wilkes.
Well, I think it is important for the public to understand the difference because when we are in a profession that requires any one of these credentials, we know it very well, right? And we understand why. And a lot of times, the jargon that we use communicates to other people who are in our field. Without even saying a word. When they see the credentials, when they see the certification, you know what it is. Especially in healthcare, we love to play the alphabet soup. So you'll see people with a long string of letters behind their names. And unless you're really in that field, you don't really know what that means. And I think a lot of
Means
people assume as long as they see all those letters, then you must be doing something. But it is important for the public to know the difference because then they're able to make informed decisions about the kinds of services that they are seeking. There are a lot of helpers. That's one of the things that I do want to state. There's a lot of ways that people can be helped and get help around a variety of things that they may be going through. So the different certifications, licensures, credentials help people to know what it is that that person's scope of practice is, and then they can make a decision against the kind of help that they're looking for.
awesome. To make sure the audience understands. Shout out to those who are watching. Feel free to talk to me in the chat. We have an engineer, right? A licensed engineer in Dr. Adrian Brown, and we have a licensed clinical psychologist in Dr. Shauna K. Denham Wilkes, right? And we have a licensed nurse in Rochelle Harris. So there are different types of licensures um, represented here. I was saying earlier that it's so common to have the expectation with Kamoy, who's not here. She's a physician. They don't necessarily think I need a licensure for other things. Maybe for a physician, yes, but other things not necessarily. And I really want us to delve into the importance of that. So, Adrian, why do you think it's important for the public to understand the difference?
I think it's very, very important for the public to distinguish between what is a professional license and what is a professional certification. So
Hmm.
there's a difference between the two. So a license is issued by a state licensing board. Like, for example, the license gives you a legal right to perform as a professional, to safeguard the health, safety, and welfare of the public. So if there are individuals that are offering services to the public, the state determined that it was in the best interest of the public to regulate this profession to protect the public from harm, from damage. And so there's a reason why there is a legal requirement for certain professionals to have a professional license to practice. A certification, on the other hand, is voluntary. There's so many certifications out there. And so it's very, very important to understand the difference between the two. Like, for example, within engineering, there are certain engineering disciplines. Like, for example, I'm an environmental engineer. So environmental engineers are often involved in a lot of different engineering functions that directly impact the public. The water that you drink at home, the air that you breathe, um, all of these areas environmental engineers practice in. And if the environmental engineer is not operating in a responsible manner, then the public could be adversely impacted. And so there are other engineering disciplines, like, for example, there's an exemption And not all engineers get an engineering license because there's an exemption. Like, for example, if you work for a private employer, like at a manufacturing site, there is what's called an industrial exemption. So the employer takes on the liability, but there are certain functions that is a requirement for you to have a license. If you're going to be providing services to the public, if you're going to be signing off on plans, if you're going to be doing consulting work, those areas require a professional engineering license. And then also, it's important that individuals don't present themselves to be an engineer. Like, engineering is a term that is used very loosely. And there are people who claim to be engineers who have never been to an engineering school. And it's very unfortunate, that, the term is used so loosely. And so, for example, in most states, you can't present yourself as a professional engineer if you're not licensed. And that is a protected title. So I can stop right there, but I do have a infographic that I'm going to show.
Okay.
And it will kind of explain further the difference between a professional license and a professional certification. Are you seeing my screen?
I see it.
Yes. So if you notice here, as I mentioned before, professional license is issued by a government agency or state licensing board. And it's oftentimes mandatory. The certification is voluntary, as you can see. Usually it's not a legal requirement for you to have a certification. But the primary purpose of a professional license is to protect the public, to ensure the public health, safety, and welfare. Whereas with a professional certification, you're just demonstrating advanced skills and knowledge. And then the scope is also important, as you can see there. So when you have a license, you have permission to operate within a very specific scope, and in this case, within a particular state, because the way how the legal system was set up, your professional license is issued by a state licensing board. So, for example, I'm licensed in Florida, Louisiana, and Nevada. So if I'm going to go to Georgia to perform engineering work that requires a license, then I would have to apply to the Georgia State Licensing Board to get my license to practice in Georgia. And that applies to all professions, whether it be you're a physician or accountant, an attorney. You have to make sure that you practice within the states that you're licensed in. And you can see the difference right there on this.
Yeah, I love it. And it seems to me that it's really about the health of the public. That's
Yes,
what it's all about. Like, so if you're practicing, you're saying you're a doctor, you're saying that you have a license when you don't, you're basically doing something that could be detrimental to the health of the public. You could create a structure that can capsize and hurt the public if you are an engineer
correct,
not licensed.
correct,
Or
correct.
what about you, Rochelle, in terms of degree versus license?
So for a degree in nursing, it's a bachelor's of science in nursing. That's the base. Some nurses do have an associate's, but most hospitals are moving away to from that degree. They want you to have a bachelor's of science in nursing. So you can have a bachelor's of science in nursing and be called a nurse, but not until you pass that NCLEX exam and you register with the state. Now you're a registered nurse. So there is a difference. And just like Adrian was saying, we're licensed by the state. If I move to a different state, I do need to apply to work in that state. But nursing does have a compact license, so most of the states are under that compact. So depending on where I go, I'm already registered to work in that state. And there are certifications in nursing. So there's, just for example, because there's a whole host, but for example, there's oncology, there's dialysis, critical care nursing is a separate certification, as well as case management. So like Adrian said, those are voluntary. I'm a nurse care manager. If I want to, I can go ahead and study to be a certified case manager, but it's not necessary or mandatory for my job. It's completely voluntary. But for me to be considered a registered nurse,
Gotta get the
I had
license.
to complete the foundational work at a school that's certified, or a school that's under that licensure, and complete that and pass that exam, the NCLEX exam.
You know what's critical is what you said there with is and all three of you got to pass the exam.
Hmm.
And I think that one of the major reasons why people don't want to go towards licensure is because of the examination that it requires. Um, I think that's one of the main reason. I don't want to go through a boards to be a physician. I don't want to go through the NCLEX to be a nurse. I don't want to go through whatever it takes to be an engineer, a PE, or a LMHC, or it require. And I tell my students all the time, you gotta have to master testing. You're gonna have to master testing, because if you don't master testing, if all you want to do is I understand the information, I can tell you about it. Why does the test matter? The test matters because licensure will you're gonna have to pass tests. You're gonna have to pass tests. Um,
100% agree. I think also the profession says there is a stepwise process, right? So when you have a license, before you can even get to sit for the exam, they're requiring that you have completed all the prerequisites, right?
Hmm.
So it is there's a smaller likelihood of not taking the exam if you have completed all the steps. That's
mhm.
why I think many clinical psychologists who are licensed had raised an eyebrow based on what was happening in social media around the particular person who was, in this
Cool.
gray area. Because if you have completed all the steps, why would you have invested all of that time, done all the things, gotten all the hours, taken all the steps that are required, and then not cross that finish line? It's highly unlikely that you would have invested all of that and not done this one last thing. So I think that it's very interesting to hear that it's so difficult to prove your credentials, because I almost have my license number memorized. And not only I'm pretty sure I have it accurately stated, but it's publicly available. You can go right
Yes,
now
Right.
to the
yes.
Office of the Professions of New York State, and you
Hmm.
can look me up. You can look me up by profession. You can look me up by name, say,
Yep.
because my name is spelled very uniquely. So if you can't figure that out, you can look me up in a variety of ways, and you will see not only if my license is current, but when I got licensed in the first place.
Mhm.
And the
Yes.
other thing that's very important is that sometimes things change in the profession.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, we think I've lost her.
Did we
Well,
lose her?
let me kind of pick up here until she comes back. So within engineering, oh,
We
she's
lost
back.
you, Shauna.
Okay.
Come back. You're back. You're back. You're
Okay,
back.
go ahead. Go ahead.
I was saying sometimes things change in the profession. Things are updated based on evidence. Evidence-based practices change. So, for example, I'm a mandated reporter, but recently in New York State, the guidelines regarding mandated reporting have changed, and so everyone, regardless of license, who is a mandated reporter, now has to update their training around that. So you can't just rely on what you learned. I was licensed initially in 2005,
Shout
but
out to shout out.
two, 2005 credentials, licensure, to maintain it in 2026, I have to be current with what the field is
Yes.
saying is
Yes.
required of anyone who holds the license that I hold.
Right.
Amen.
Yeah, let me ask the next question. What are the risks to public trust and safety when individuals present themselves as experts without the proper credentials or licensure?
Ooh.
Yeah.
It taints the whole profession, actually.
Yeah.
Florida a couple years ago was under scrutiny for nursing schools just handing out fake licenses. So now the public is wondering when they go to the hospital, when they go to the clinic, when they go anywhere, are you a real nurse? Where did you go to school? Did you pass the
Mhm.
test or did you pay for your license? So it kind of puts a damper on the entire profession. And it's really bad when you report to a board, because I report to the Florida Board of Nursing. You report to a board and then you find out that they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. It's like, okay, well, I went to school, I passed my test, I paid my fees. Why aren't you doing what you're supposed to be doing? So not only does the public, it puts a damper on the public, but the rest of the profession, the nurses in Florida are very upset about the whole situation. Because again, if you go to a reputable school and you take your coursework, you pay for your coursework, you pass the test, you have to pay for the test, pay for your licensure. You're doing what you're supposed to be doing, but there's other people not doing what they're supposed to be doing. They're getting away with it. That's not fair.
Not fair.
Yeah, I could say that the public is put at risk when there are charlatans that are claiming to be professionals and they don't have the education, the training, or they have not proven minimal competency. And that's the reason why we have to pass an exam. You have to demonstrate minimal competency.
Right.
You can't have people providing professional services and you don't have some type of a benchmark to indicate that this person is competent at what they're doing.
Right.
Within engineering, I'm going to share my screen briefly.
Mm-hmm.
There's a requirement for accreditation. There's accreditation requirements within engineering. And what I'm going to do here, I'm going to show you, because there are two different types of degrees that you can earn. You can earn an engineering degree, which is a traditional engineering degree, and an engineering technology degree. And both of those degrees require accreditation, as you can see right here. But a traditional engineering degree is very heavy on the advanced math and science. But as you can see, for the engineering technology, it's more applied math. So, for example, for those of you in college, you have to do 3 semesters of calculus to get an engineering degree, differential equations, calculus-based physics. But if you see for the engineering technology degree, it's trigonometry, applied math. So it's not as heavy with the math and the science. It's more hands-on, as you can see here. But the engineering degree, the traditional engineering degree, is more abstract, conceptual, in terms of the complex calculations that you have to learn how to do. And there are professional standards that the accreditation board sets. So for anybody who wants to enter an engineering program, it's very, very important that you enter a program that is accredited, because if you do not graduate from an accredited program, when you go to get your engineering license, it's going to be problematic. You have to graduate from an accredited engineering program in order for you to qualify to sit for the exam, as Rochelle was mentioning before. You have to have that background and you have to have that education in order for you to sit for these professional licensing exams.
And it's so that this is so critical. And I don't care what kind. I like the way you show there's different types of degrees. If you're hands-on, or you want to be an engineering technologist, or if you want to be a plumber.
Exactly.
If you want to be a plumber, you have to have a license. Now there are some plumbers that do not have license, and I want to talk to the people who want to take the shortcut, right? If you want to be hands-on, you want to do even blue collar work, and you don't go the licensure route, you're at risk of I'll be nice, leaving money on the table, or I'll be harsh, being a slave. Let me if all you want to do is hands-on without licensure, they're going to use you, brother. They're going to use your hands. And if you don't have the licensure, you won't be able to move up. You won't be able to run certain types of businesses. You have to be a licensed plumber. You have to be a licensed electrician. You have to be like it doesn't matter blue collar, white collar. You got to take the test.
Exactly. And even today, I went to the barber. I'm not going to go to a barber who's not licensed. I get all of these infections in my hair and all of these things. There's a reason why the state requires for barbers to have a license
Mhm.
because, hygiene practices and all of those things, they're supposed to know how to properly serve the public to safeguard their health, safety, and welfare.
Yeah.
And I will say this, that licensure, that one really hit close to home, Adrian, because I definitely took my son to the barber because our home barber, his dad, my husband, was not available. And I took him to the barber, and sure enough, I'm watching the barber, and the barber made a move towards my son that was not hygienic, in terms of not washing his hands before he began working on my son's head, and not washing his hands after I saw the hands near the barber's mouth. I don't want to gross anybody out, but so he was eating, and then he went to directly begin the service on my son, and his license was right there. And so I only have one child. He's my miracle baby, and ain't no more coming. So of course I was like, in my head. And outside I said, "Excuse me, would you mind washing your hands? My son's scalp is very sensitive." And of course he obliged. So it's not to say that the licensed person is a guarantee that there is no harm.
True.
True.
Right?
True.
But the important thing is that because the person has the license and the requirements for the license are so clearly stated, if there is harm, then there is a recourse. There is
Yes.
an
Yes.
escalation pathway
Yes.
for
Yes.
advocacy, right?
Mhm,
So it's
mhm.
very important to keep that in mind as well, especially people of color. The history of abuses that have happened through the healthcare system is part of the reason why certain licensure requirements are there in the
Yes.
first place,
Yes.
right? And
Yes.
it's important for us to do no harm. One of the most frequent statements that you will hear a healthcare workers talk about is their need to protect their license. Because
Yes. Yes.
the same way that it's publicly available whether or not my license is current and valid, if you do something to mess your license up, that's publicly available
Yes.
also.
Yes.
Right.
People will
Yes.
see that if they search your name as well.
Yes.
So I
Right.
think it's really important for us to talk about harm, that a license is
Yes.
not a guarantee of safety, but is a
Mhm.
guarantee of advocacy and recourse for the public.
Yes,
Right.
yes, because licensed professionals are accountable to the public, and there are ethical standards oftentimes that has to be followed. And if those standards are not followed, then you can actually appeal to the licensing board. This
Mhm.
person can be disciplined. You can go and check to see the disciplinary history of the licensed professional, and then you can make your decision if you want to continue. If you want to continue with services from that person, from
Right.
that licensed
Yes.
professional.
So when she was talking about, oh, I don't need a license to be a life coach, she was basically saying I can get away with even harm. That's why I can come on social media and say anything and have no recourse. Many licensed professionals wouldn't have the ability to go and speak and say these things because they would not want to be at threat of their license. Brian, you look like you want to say something. What are your thoughts, sir? What do you? Let me bring you in.
I don't know why I'm here. Uh, you
You're here.
constantly bring it's and I get it, comic relief, but it's I work for the federal government, so I work in public health, so I know all about licensure. Having individuals NPI numbers. My wife even has one. Um, my the question that I have is for y'all have licenses. For
Mhm.
those that are unlicensed that are in your circle, how do you engage with them where it doesn't come off that I don't really have to listen to you because you didn't go the extra mile. You started the race, you didn't finish it. So how do you engage with those who don't have licenses to one either I would say encourage them to continue, but then also don't make them feel bad for not having it?
Mm,
Okay, that's a very good question. Let me start off because not all engineers pursue the licensing route. And as I mentioned before, there's an industrial exemption if you work for a corporation, if you're not providing services directly to the public. And within my profession, I've come across a lot of engineers who are not licensed. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're not good engineers. We have a lot of great engineers that did not pursue licensure. And so I still treat them with respect, but there are certain things that they are not allowed to sign off on. If there's a permit application that's going to be submitted to the state, if they're submitting a report, you know, if there's, for example, a community meeting and the public is involved and questions are being asked, um, you know, there are certain things that we have to be very mindful of because you can't present yourself as a licensed engineer when you're not licensed. And so there could be some repercussions for that. But for me, I treat them with the same respect as I would a licensed professional engineer um, because we don't want to come across as elitist. So that's kind of how I would address that. But if you have more specific questions, I can explain further. Thank you.
yeah, just stay. In my opinion, stay in your lane. Right?
Exactly.
If stay in your lane, I mean, listen,
Oh, come on.
stay in your
If Vivian
listen.
Thomas stayed in his lane, where would we be?
No, no. See, Vivian Thomas did stay in his lane.
He had some
Okay. So
influence.
let's give some background on Vivian Thomas. This is one of my favorite stories.
Yes.
African American, didn't have access to go to medical school, but he was so brilliant. He was a
Sound like Brian.
scientist. He was a scientist, and he worked on dogs. One of my biggest inspirations. He helped in that process of discovering how to work on the heart.
Mhm.
Um, he did this experimentation with dogs. He, as a scientist, over and over and over and over and over again. And the doctor asked him to come and stand and watch as he now transmits it from the dog to the human. That's translational medicine. Physicians work with basic scientists all the time. He stayed in his lane. He
Mhm.
didn't work on the heart directly. He didn't touch
He
the
had
body.
influence. But let's say if he stayed in his lane, how
Okay,
was he going to influence?
I think, and we're gonna move on. But I think the work of influence,
You know what?
the
Move
work
on.
of
Just move on.
influence was his lane. So I'm not saying stay in the background. Whatever your lane is, the work of influence was Vivian Thomas's lane. Anybody want to respond to what he was,
Well,
what Brian
Yeah,
said?
I'll try
I'll
to
take one.
respond. I'll try to respond. So, in any profession, you have ethical standards that you have to abide by. And as a licensed professional, like for example, I'm an environmental engineer. I'm not going to go practice electrical engineering or mechanical engineering. And it's the same within the medical profession. You wouldn't go to, a male. I wouldn't go to an OBGYN, you know. You have certain specific disciplines that you have training. If you don't have the training, the education, and the experience, you're not supposed to provide services in those areas. And so that's kind of where licensing comes into play because you're supposed to operate based on ethical guidelines. And most professional licensing, you do not provide services that you don't have education, training, or expertise in. So
Yeah,
that's kind of how I would answer that question.
for sure.
Maya, you need to take notes. That's how you respond to me.
Stay in your lane, okay?
I don't like that.
Shauna, you look like you were going to say
Yeah.
something.
I was going to say a lot of times when I tell people that I'm a psychologist, people will tell me, oh, I have a bachelor's in psychology. And it is actually one of the most common majors in undergrad is a bachelor's in psychology. Many, many people have a bachelor's in psychology. But the minimum entry requirement for most healthcare settings in order to practice as a psychologist outside of a school setting, if you're a school psychologist with a master's in school psychology, is the terminal degree. Like to start, to get in the door, is that doctorate in psychology. So while many people have a bachelor's in psychology, which I always think is great because that helps more people in the general public have an understanding of human behavior, which is, you know, transferable across degrees and professions and stages of life. So to me, it's great that many people have that collegiate level of psychological exposure and training, right? But the profession says that in order to practice where you are intervening in people's lives, you need the terminal degree and the requisite supervision by a licensed psychologist. So, for people who have gone some of the way, one of the things I say to them is, listen, if you want to make any money,
Hey,
you
only
gotta
stable.
finish. You know, let's on a practical level. In order to really work as a psychologist, you've got to complete the steps. And the other thing as well, also is people will tell me, "Oh, it takes so long." And I often tell them, oh, but the time is going to pass anyway, you know.
Mhm.
So in 5 years, 6 years, 5 years, 6 years will pass, and in that time you would have completed. So don't give up, continue, go to that next level. So I do think it's a great question because there are people who have gone part of the way and then they may pivot because of various reasons, but the knowledge that they gain along the way is still valuable. You just can't call yourself the licensed professional. That's it.
Anyway. All right. How can students, parents, employers verify whether someone's academic background and professional license are legitimate? I think you were alluding to that quite a bit. So, what are you talking about? You can check. What are you talking? Like Rochelle, you tend to know how to check stuff. What do you?
Detective.
Yeah. What?
So for nursing, if you want to, and I did this to a couple of my classmates to see if, you know, they actually passed their test. I know I'm nosy. So Florida Board of Nursing, you can Google it. You can go on there. There's a tab that says verify licensure. So you click on the tab, you could put my name in, and it'll tell you when I first received my license, when it expires, and if I have any type of complaints against me. I think Adrian did bring that up. It's there to protect the public, basically. So if you want to know if anybody's filed a complaint against me, you can go on Florida Board of Nursing and look at my licensure, and it'll tell you. If you have any people that say, "Oh yeah, I'm a nurse practitioner," you can go and verify if they're really a nurse practitioner, because they can take the coursework, but again, if they don't pass the test, they cannot call themselves a nurse practitioner. They just have a master's in nurse. I shouldn't say just, I apologize. But they have a master's in nursing, but they cannot call themselves a nurse practitioner unless they pass their test. So again, you can look it up and see if they've actually passed that test. They may have passed the coursework, but you have to pass the test in order to be called a nurse practitioner. And I look people up all the time because I'm nosy.
Yeah, yeah. If you know, so you can look people up, but I think this is a critical message right here.
Okay,
Gotta
to answer is
one second, Adrian. You gotta master testing. Like
Yeah.
there are a lot of people out there saying, "I'm not a good test taker. I'm not a." You have to push through. You have to get your kids. Those of you who are parents, you have to train them on how to take tests when they're young as well. Don't wait. Go ahead,
I
Adrian.
want to say, Maya, it's twofold for nursing. So you have to know how to take the test and you have to know how to apply the knowledge, right? Because for the NCLEX, it goes, if you keep answering the easy questions, they're going to start throwing harder questions at you. And the harder questions are scenarios. They're not
Mhm.
real life. So you have to know. I'll give you an example. One of my questions was talking about an infection. It was a made up infection, but it gave you clues that it was based on tuberculosis, but it didn't tell you it was tuberculosis. So you have to know if it's viral, if it's fungal, if it's, you have to know those things. So you have to have the knowledge. You have to be able to apply the knowledge.
Critical
And
thinking.
for me, since I was a high school teacher and I used to create tests, I know what the test is asking me to do. But again, I also knew how to apply the knowledge. So it's twofold. It's twofold.
Yeah, yeah. Adrian, you wanted to say something?
Yes, I was just going to say that you can go on myfloridalicense.com and
Gotcha.
there's a tab there, verify license. You click on it. You can put in my first and last name. And I always use my middle initial
Nobody's
because there's
questioning
another Adrian
y'all have
Brown out there.
licenses.
And so
Ah,
I make sure that I include my middle initial and you can
Mm-hmm.
verify my license. You'll see when it was issued, if there's any disciplinary actions,
Mm-hmm.
when it expires, because for every licensed professional, you have to renew your license.
Right.
You have to take what's considered to be continuing education
that's
Units.
right.
Yeah.
units in order for you to get your license, in
Mm-hmm.
order for you to keep up with what's going on within your profession. You're supposed to keep up with all of those things. And then there's requirements in terms of how many continuing education units you need to accumulate during the licensing period for you to renew your license.
Right.
So,
Got a quick question about that. With the CEUs, yeah, I'm using the terms now. With the CEUs,
yes,
Yes.
yes.
you have
Okay,
free.
okay,
I don't need
okay.
everybody to say yes. I know what I'm talking about. No, but seriously, there are free CEUs and then there are paid. Does the
Mhm.
profession look at those differently?
Well, let
Not
me
for
answer.
nursing.
Let me
No,
answer
not
for
for nursing.
engineering. Remember, you get your license from the state. And for Florida, the provider has to be an approved provider. You can't just go to anybody and say, oh, I completed my continuing education unit from this provider. It has to be an approved provider for Florida. There are some other states that doesn't really require that provider to be approved, but for Florida, it has to be board approved. And the Florida Board of Professional Engineers have a list of approved providers posted on
Mm-hmm.
the website. And so most professional conferences, they're approved for all states. Like, for example, there's a conference coming up in New York City in August. And I typically go to the conference and I get my continuing education
Education.
units. And then I submit that certificate and I can renew my license when the time comes around. Typically, it's every 2 years for engineers. I don't know about the other
It's two
professions.
years for nursing too.
Yeah, it's very
Yeah.
similar. And I tell you what, in order for the institution to offer appropriate CEUs, the content has to be verified by a licensed person of that profession. So the licensure issue comes up over and
All the
over again, right?
How am
I
I going to find
just
the envelope?
recently started a new job. I work in the largest public health system in New York, and I moved from one facility to another facility in the same health system. And in order for me to be able to have credentials to practice in the new facility, which is literally around the corner from the old facility, I had to re credential
Yep.
all over again. I'm like,
Wow.
but I can practice because I was practicing around the corner. I can see
It's
the
on
other buildings
file.
from
It's
We
on
here.
don't know what
file.
they do around the corner.
It's right there. And the lady said, absolutely, doc. But can you please send me a copy of your license, a copy of your internship certificate, your CEUs and etc., a copy of your CV, all of that all over again. And I wanted to just add another thing about the testing, Maya, because I think that is so important. I have someone who's near and dear to me who is a highly functioning professional in her highly specialized field, and she struggled to pass exams, but on the didactics, right, on the theory, but on the practical part of her training, where you could actually see her do the work, she was head and shoulders above anyone else. Come to find out, she had an undiagnosed learning
Learn
disability.
disability. Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
so it's one thing to talk about being able to lock in regarding testing, but the other thing that's very important is to be able to know that if there is a challenge, if there is a difficulty, that we need to get the help that our young people need early
Mhm.
on,
Yeah.
and make sure that they have the supports that they need in order um, to be able to sit for all those exams that they're sitting for. So let's not miss the opportunity to get the assessments that they need, because your young person may have so many smarts, but there may be a difference in the way they process information, the amount of time they need to do that,
Mhm.
whether or
Mhm.
not they can be more successful if questions are read to them or if they have an assistive device that levels
Mhm.
the playing field for them. So I think it's very important for parents not to just watch their young person struggle and say, oh, but you're so smart, you should be able to do this. But if they need assessment, get the assessment early and make
Right.
sure that they
Mhm.
have the resources that they need in order to be as successful as possible. Whether that's tutoring, whether that's speech, language, occupational physical therapy, whatever it is, to support them to be as successful as possible. Struggle to do it is not necessary. Don't be afraid of a
Mhm.
label that gets your young person the resources that that label
Yeah.
requires. It is their right
Mm.
as a
Yeah.
student in the United States of America to
Yes.
have the educational resources that they need in order to be successful. Don't let it wait until
Mm.
they're in their profession and trying to pass their boards for that to
That's
be
so
the
Mhm.
time for
powerful.
us to find out that they have an undiagnosed learning disability.
Yeah, yeah. Because I used to tutor learning disabled students, and I remember that when their condition was documented, they were given extra time,
Right.
and there's a lot of resources that's available
Mhm.
to kind of help. Because, as you mentioned, they can function well, but they just need the extra time and resources to be able to pass the exam. So I think that's very, very important.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But deal with it ASAP in any way that you can, so that you can be successful, so that your child can be successful in the future. Lysandra, what's going on? So Lysandra says test prep training isn't easy for many. It isn't taught like it should be in schools. It's a money making thing. Many tests have aspects that are unrelated to the core career. They are unrealistically hard and are geared for people to fail, so that they can. Let me make sure I'm reading the whole thing, so that they can be taken again. The proof is what the proof is that when curriculum changes, they don't update you with the new information for free. Many employers won't pay for updating the work education. This is coming from Lysandra Alice, who is an educator in the public school system. What do you guys think about that?
Um,
Yes,
Well, that's a very loaded question. It's a
you loaded
very loaded
point. You
question.
loaded,
And
I like
allow
the question.
somebody to respond
Well,
because I have some
to be
thoughts.
to be very honest, right? Sometimes there is a knowledge deficit or a knowledge curve about how to approach prepping for a specific kind of exam. I will take my degree, for example. Many of the questions on the psychology licensure exam in New York are about organizational psychology, which is not what I trained in. I'm a clinical psychologist, so specifically a child and adolescent psychologist. So when we were getting ready to take our exam, we had to prepare for that exam. That meant getting past questions. That meant forming a study group. We went to a 5 day prep course, and some of us paid for additional study materials in order to be ready. That is not uncommon, and that is a pathway for persons to have as much information about the kinds of approaches they need to take in order to be ready. So it isn't necessarily a walk in the park. And remember, the licensure is based on specific content. That information is usually publicly available. And then, of course, there are lots of organizations who make it their business and their for profit business to prep persons for these licensing exams. Um, the I don't have the same experience about curriculum changes and employers not paying for updating the education, because in the healthcare field, they want to make sure that their workforce has what they need so that when things change, just the same way I talked about the mandated reporter requirements in New York State, when those things change, the employers want their workforce in healthcare to be ready, and they provide pathways for their staff. They take on the cost so that their workforce is able to meet those changes, especially when it's a regulatory requirement. So I do hear what Lysandra is saying, and it is important for people to, again, don't thug it out. You got to pay for the prep course. You got to, get the previous questions. You have to form those study groups. You have to take those approaches that you need to be as prepared as possible.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Hey, go
Yeah,
ahead.
'cause what I
I
don't
was
want is
Wait, hold on.
somebody
Oh, wait,
like
wait.
myself,
Yeah, go
but
ahead.
someone like me who's unlicensed to easily breeze through a test. It needs to be hard. It
Right.
needs to be something substantial. It needs to be something that I know that this person went again the extra mile in order to achieve, so that I know when I do come to them in my moment of need that they are
Competent.
they took competent. Yeah, that's the they were competent, that they valued it so much that they were willing to invest their extra time, their extra money. I'm married to a teacher, and I understand about the whole education, like testing in elementary, middle school, high school. But when you get to college, at that time, it's about what you can do and what you're willing to do. After you finish college, then about licensure, it's about what you're willing to do in order to prove that you really want this. You gotta go all the way.
And
If
that's why
not,
it's so disrespectful when people fake it.
yeah,
Yeah, it's disrespect. It's
And obvious, because if I were to try to talk some engineering language right now, I would be sounding like a Dr. Seuss book, like the what's it not said, the who's it what's it, and the circuit of the what. I just would not be able to fluently discuss the technical terminology that would make sense to the ear of an engineer, right? So I
but
think that yeah.
But here's the thing, Shauna. The
Uh-huh.
the problem is the audience, the majority of the audience aren't engineers. So you
Right.
could probably, like remember in Living Color, they live,
Yeah.
David was like, and the pontification of if the audience said, "Wow,
Right.
he sounds deep," because most of the audience, they're not engineers, and
Yeah.
that's the struggle, especially in our community, where there's not a high respect and high regard, in my opinion, for higher terminal education, and so they're like, "You don't need that. I don't need to do it. I can," and then therefore they don't have an ear. They don't have the ear for it, and
Yeah, I
so
think that's a valid
anybody
point.
anybody can come and say anything, and it will sound right to them. Anyway,
But
Amy,
that's why it took
go ahead.
that's
Okay, go
why
ahead.
it took that's why it took an actual licensed person
Question.
to say, I gotta call it out,
That's
Mhm.
right?
right.
Someone
That's right.
who understood, because she is deeply trained and
Mhm.
licensed, to say, wait a minute, this is harmful. And I'm
Right.
going to tell you what you should be listening for, what you should be looking for in order to know what you should be hearing, right? Because to your point, because there's still so much mental health stigma, people do think, oh, I give great advice. Why do you need to go to the therapist is only giving you great advice? That's all they're doing, right? And
Mhm.
so it doesn't, it's not that big of a deal. What if she
Mm-hmm.
calls herself whatever she calls herself? But if you are licensed, if you understand how important it is to appropriately manage someone's mental health, then it does behoove you to call it out
Mm-hmm.
and to make sure that the general public does understand that this is not in line
Right.
with sound
Mhm.
practice.
Right.
Mm.
Mhm. Mhm.
I'm gonna ask a question, and then you can answer, Adrian. Why should students and career changers consider careers with recognized licensure and certification pathways when planning for long-term success? Why is it important? Because, like you said, there's some people that a lot of engineers that don't have the PE. But why do you think it's important that you should consider that?
Okay, let me try to answer that question. So it depends on the state that you live in. Like for example, the PE, there's actually two steps to get to the PE. You
Mhm.
have to pass what's called the fundamentals of engineering. So that's based on things that you've learned through your engineering curriculum, and that's an exam that you have to pass. Then you have to have the experience, and then you take what's called the Principles and Practice of Engineering exam, which is a national exam. So all of the engineering exams are national exams. And once you pass the FE and the PE, then you have to pass the state exam, where you have to learn the state rules and ethics, because Florida law is different from California and Arizona
In New York.
and New York.
Mhm.
So you have to pass the state specific laws that govern the practice of engineering. And then you get your license. And
Yeah,
so,
it was the
you
fourth one.
know, there's all of these steps that you have to you have to, you know,
But why is that important
cover all of
for
those
success?
requirements in order for you to have your license. And the reason for that is to protect the public. You know, Ignorance of the law does not relieve you of the obligation to comply. I tell
But
people this all the time,
here's the
you
thing,
know.
Adrian. I understand it's important to protect the public, but there are a lot of people who are selfish. You're like, I don't want to go through one, two, three, four exams for other people. I don't care about other people. Is there
Mm,
any value in it?
there is. Let me tell you the value. Let me
Okay.
tell you the value. If you
Okay.
want to start your own engineering firm,
Mm.
you need an engineering license if you're going to be providing services to the public. If you're going to be applying for a permit from a building department, from a government agency, you need to have your license, because if you're not licensed, they can't give you the permit, because you do not have the legal right to perform that particular function.
Mhm.
So yeah, and then obviously it helps you do career advancement as well,
Mhm.
because you're able to demonstrate competence. You're bound to ethical standards. You're recognized as an expert in your field, and so there's that benefit as well. And if you look at the long-term value, like for example, say you're a professor, you're teaching there at a college. Design courses have to be taught by a licensed professional engineer, because how can you have an unlicensed person teaching somebody that's going to go out there and be making these decisions that could impact the public? So a lot of engineering programs are requiring the capstone, which is the design classes, to be taught by licensed engineers. And
Yeah.
so that's the value right there. Look at the long-term value, because licensed engineers are paid more than unlicensed engineers, depending on the profession. Let me qualify that. Depending on the profession, you know. So
Yeah,
so
yeah,
that's how I
yeah.
would answer that
Bryant
question.
was showing his wallet. He was showing his wallet and advancement. Listen, we're not playing a poppy show. That's the Jamaican. Like Adrian and Shauna K. Like, let me. I'm not gonna tell you what they do, but these people, just check their LinkedIn profile. I'll just. I know some friends. I got friends in high places. Okay, I'll just stop there. So they have. I mean, I'm talking about managers and chief executive officers, right? The level of leadership requires terminal degrees and licensures. That and so yes, you can do things that do not require it, but if you want to be a leader, if you want to be a thought leader, if you want to be in leadership, go ahead. I'm not, you,
Well,
I see. No, hold
I
on.
was going to say something, but I'm going to put it out there, especially as a minority. I'm going to
It's
put it out there, especially as a minority, because, I can speak about engineering. There was a time in which minorities were not allowed to enter the engineering profession. And even now, Black engineers are few because to get into an engineering program is a limited access program. And then they have these weeding out courses,
Mhm.
and oftentimes, a lot of minorities are weeded out and they just don't graduate. And so it's very, very important, especially as a minority person, when you're occupying these spaces. When you have your license, you have demonstrated that you're a competent professional. And if you want to go and start a business for yourself, you can go and start your own engineering firm. You
yeah,
have a license to do that. But if you don't have that license, you're
yeah,
going to be restricted, and you
yeah.
don't want to have restrictions. So that's how I would actually put forth that argument.
That's so true. So true. Brian, you wanted to say something, and I'm going to the last question. This has been an awesome conversation, y'all. Yeah, go
I'll
ahead, Brian.
I'll just say this. I mean, you in this current fiscal environment, and I again work for the government. I've seen entire people get riffed. To have a license, if you're in public or even in private, it's very hard to stay unemployed if you really want to be employed,
That's true.
because all of these places will take someone with a license over someone who is trying to obtain because you're already there.
Hmm.
So if you're
Exactly.
trying to insulate yourself, young people, listen, if you are trying to insulate yourself, the best insulation is having that licensure, is having that certificate or having
Mhm.
that license on the wall. So as soon as someone walks in, before they even validate you by your skin, by how many letters, they see that seal. They're like, I know that I can trust this person, or this person has value. Now, when you
Mhm.
open your mouth, you're confirming it. But until you do that, that license, it insulates you and helps to leverage your survivability in
Right.
an untenable landscape.
Listen, in these streets, I learned that from my uncle. He said, Maya, choose a field that requires licensure. He always and I didn't go that route, but even when I was getting advice from him as to what I should do the next step after I got my PhD, he's like, whatever licensure looks like in your field, go that route. So I was contemplating doing a postdoc versus going straight in. He said, do the postdoc. That's the licensure in your field. Do it. And he and I would advise any student in the future, like if you're trying to get a degree, I mean, ask God what he wants you to do. But if you're still not sure, choose something that requires licensure. Choose something that requires licensure. It's nice to get all these other fluffy degrees. Choose something that requires licensure, you guys. That's just my in my opinion. Last question. What lessons can aspiring STEM and healthcare professionals learn from recent public conversations about credentials, accountability, and professional standards? Rashad, I like you to answer that question first. What lessons can aspiring STEM and healthcare professionals learn?
I would say consult with whatever pathway career wise you choose. Consult with their association. Just go and review the website, review the state, of course, the state licensing board. Just review the website, see if there's anything that you need to know, give you ideas. And again, know that those licensing boards are there to protect you, to protect the consumer. Um, and they're important. You're going to have to refer to them for the rest of your career. So try to have an understanding of what they do for you, as well as how they can protect you and protect the consumer.
Yeah. Anybody else? What lessons? What lessons?
Let me share. So it's very, very important that you look at what the licensing requirements are for each particular state that you're interested in either living or practicing if you're going to be a practicing professional engineer. Like, for example, Florida is not a discipline-specific state. Let me explain that. So, for example, in Nevada, where I was first licensed, you have your PE and it says PE environmental. So you're an environmental engineer. Same thing for Louisiana. Okay, you're a professional engineer, you're licensed for environmental. In Florida, it's very broad.
Okay.
He's just professional engineer. So, you know, I could probably go and do a little civil or go and do a little mechanical. But then you're held to the ethical standard that, okay, you're not supposed to practice in an engineering discipline that you have the education, training, and experience in. So you have to look at what those requirements are. Let me give another example. For Louisiana, I think historically they've had some challenges with ethical issues. So I have to take a 1-hour ethics class every year to maintain my Louisiana license. And I thought to myself, why am I sitting in this 1-hour class every year to maintain my Louisiana license? But I did it to earn the license, and I'm not going to let it go. I'm not going to put it in retirement status. I'm going to keep it. So typically in December every year, or other times within the year, I try to make sure I satisfy that 1-hour ethics course requirement for the state of Louisiana. And different states have different requirements, where that is concerned. So you want to make sure you look into those requirements. Some states require that you have the 4 years experience before you take the exam. Some states you can take the exam early, acquire the experience, then you can get your license. So you have to look at the states and determine where you want to live, where you want to practice, and what the requirements are.
And what I'm hearing is keep it. I'm hearing from all you guys. Maintain it, keep it for all of them. Yeah, I'll let you close with what lessons, Dr. Shauna K.
I would say this, based on all the recent developments, I hope people learn that ethics are as important or even more important than technical skills, and that integrity needs to be more important than popularity. I think that accountability is also a part of professionalism. And so when we put all those things together, ethics, integrity, and accountability, at the end of the day, when no one is looking, when the spotlight is not on you, if you are abiding by your training and your certification and your licensure requirements, then you know that you are working in a way that you can hold your head up high, because you are personally living an ethical, professional, and an accountable life, not only before your colleagues and those that you're serving, but also before God.
Love that.
Yes.
That is amazing. Yeah, this has been an awesome conversation. And my plea is to the audience. Choose better. Choose better voices to listen to, and go based on standards, and not like Shauna K says, popularity or the look. We gotta be a better audience. When we're a better audience, we'll get better people speaking to us. Brian, you have the last word. Yeah.
Okay.
Your non-licensed self, like myself, like me. Go
I'll
ahead.
just say this. Talents can only open doors. But it's the licensure that's the key to keeping that door open. It's the final stop that transforms potential into lasting impact. So we've talked about this ad nauseum. For those who are coming behind us, get your license.
Yeah.
It's going to be worth it. It's going to keep you relevant in a time where relevancy is as inconsequential as influence. So just do whatever you need. Reach out to someone. You're not in this alone. You're not going to be the only person with that license. So reach out to those who have gone before you and just continue to thirst after knowledge, because once you get it, do everything you can to not lose it.
That's it.
Yes.
I am the phenomenal STEMist, and so are they. Everybody wave at the camera. Wave at the camera. Bye.